Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, I'm speaking with Catherine Dahl, CEO of Beanworks, a financial automation firm based in Vancouver. This episode is sponsored by Beanworks, and we begin by recapping a hugely important 12 months in the company's history from March 2020 to March 2021. Beanworks played a critical role for their clients as the pandemic began, supporting companies in a world where paper processes had become hugely difficult to manage. 12 months later, business services and software firm Quadient acquired the company, and in the meantime, they also made a more serious move into the Microsoft ecosystem, with a new integration for Dynamics GP and a Business Central option also planned. We discuss the company's plans for the future, what the company is learning from their customers. We hear more on Catherine's outlook on innovation and finance and about the company's broader Microsoft channel plans. Okay, well, Catherine Dahl, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Jason. It's really great to be here.
Yeah, I wanted to begin by really maybe looking back at the 2020 and 2021 time period and what it's really meant for Beanworks. I think for the purposes of this discussion, obviously an integration with Dynamics GP that launched was very interesting. I'd like to know a little more about that, but also just some of the significance of that year for you and for the company and what it meant. Maybe you could start with the launch of GP and then speak a little more broadly.
Yeah, so 2020 is obviously a very pivotal year for us. The pandemic forced accounting teams to work from home, which for the most part, prior to the pandemic, they didn't. That generated a significant demand increase for us in 2020 over 2019. And that a big piece of the marketplace is Microsoft products. And up until this point, we'd been in other sectors, but not had a strong presence in terms of integrations with Microsoft GP or NAV or Business Central. And so we'd had a very light integration with GP before, but it wasn't a good one. So we didn't really market to that group. But we were having a lot of inbound interest from Microsoft customers. So we started in 2019 looking at this because we've been seeing this uptake even back then, but it got stronger in 2020. So we embarked in 2020 by working with a reseller in the States to make sure we built it correctly and put it on our Smart Sync tool so that it would be a plug and play, seamless integration. We launched that integration late 2020, and then early customers gave us some feedback, and we quickly added some depth to it in the first half of this year, which makes it much more robust from purchase order to electronic payment. And now we've enhanced it to include the ability to make purchase orders in our system and push them into GP. So that kind of opens up that market much broader for us. And we're also now looking at moving into the other Microsoft products in Navision, AX, and Business Central in order to have that full suite integration across the Microsoft suite and opening up that market for those customers to take advantage of an online payables automation platform. So that's pretty significant. We almost doubled our growth last year. We're pretty close to doubling our revenue again this year, which was where we were in 2019. So AP automation is, kind of still in its infancy in terms of customers realizing it's out there and seeing that that's a much easier way to do business. And the pandemic just sort of sped that up with people having to figure out, how am I going to pay a vendor when I'm not in the office? I can't cut checks anymore, or I have to go into the office to do it. And so it caused a lot of challenges for customers in 2020 and still even today. And now the world just feels that it can, do hybrid. So that's where the accounting world's going as well. So it will continue to be something that will be adopted across, I believe, all accounting teams over time.
Yeah, for sure. And the other big event that stuck out to me in the company's last year was its acquisition, right? Can you tell us a little more about what's significant about that?
Yeah, so that was a very interesting and surprising inquiry from a company in Europe called Quadient, who are the Pitney Bowes of Europe, but also have a very significant presence in North America. They have 500,000 customers globally, and they are a paper mail-based hardware software company, and there's a mandate in Europe to move from paper-based to digital invoices for B2B, and it's being legislated in France now, and that's going to continue through the rest of the European countries over the coming years. And that led Quadient to realize that they needed to find a digital version of what they did quickly. So they They reached out through consultants, assessed over 200 companies in North America. They wanted a North American-based product and found us, liked us, and voila, they bought us rather quickly. So it came faster and rather unexpectedly for us. We weren't really looking to be acquired at that time, but we want to go global, and Quadient is a large publicly traded global company that gives us the advantage in Europe, and so that is what we're actually embarking on with them, leading the way with us in the new year in 2022.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, hugely exciting. Like you said, happened quickly, but for a company that's been around since 2012, as I understand, and even before that in your work in this space, right?
Yeah, we came out of a different version of ourselves, and that company was around for a couple of years, and I had joined that company, and then it had some issues, kind of ended abruptly, and 6 of us picked up the IP to customers, rebuilt the platform. So the first 3 to 4 years we were in R&D mode because we had to maintain a customer base, and that's where we had our first GP integration, actually. One of our customers who's now in the new integration has been with us for ever since then, Harbor Air. They were our first GP customer and used our first integration, and they're much happier with the new one. But yeah, so that was, I've been at this since 2009 in terms of AP automation, and people really had no idea what a cloud accounting was back then. So it was really early, and the benefits of it were very hard to imagine for the accounting team until now. And the pandemic, of course, has sped that up exponentially. I want to say it's probably advanced the automation in accounting by 5 to 10 years because accountants are laggards in general. And I can say that I am a CPA, so I can say that about myself. I'm probably less laggard than most because I run a tech company, but it's still, it's not an advanced, it's not an area of technology, or it's not an area where profession where those in it feel that technology is going to help them do their jobs more efficiently. But it is happening now, and the last 18 months has really changed that view for CFOs out there, which is great.
Yeah, it's amazing that after all this time, there's still so much work to do in this realm of automating some of these tasks. And it's a competitive space too, the AP automation, invoice management, the vendors that are out there alongside Beanworks. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how you viewed your need to differentiate or compete with your product?
It is a humongous market. So it appears to be competitive, but it isn't really. There's a handful of real players. And I say handful, there's maybe, and I mean five, less than 5 real players in AP automation. There are lots and lots of payments companies, lots and lots of merchant services companies that kind of seem to be engulfed in this idea that they're part of AP automation. But workflow compliance automation end to end is a very small subset of companies that do it. And they're mostly in North America. There's a couple in Europe, and the market is just way too big for any one of them to win. So it is very much an open ocean for us to go out and find our group, but we focus in on a specific type and size of customer, and we're trying to focus in on the ones in the mid-market. So the Microsoft from NAV, GP, Business Central, that whoever buys that type of accounting system is well suited to use our product. And so what we're looking to do is solve the problem for a relatively small accounting team. In the size of the company is less relevant. It's more around the invoice volume that they're managing, locations, people in different places, approvers on the go, and they need robust enterprise-based compliance systems, but they can't pay the price that they can't afford a Concur, or they can't afford an Ariba, and they're not using SAP. So we're trying to satisfy that sort of price point for customers that need a robust system, but can't afford to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on it. So that's where we sit. So we're looking at that, we started anywhere from a few $100s a month up to our biggest customers, $10,000 or $11,000 a month. That's for us is a very large customer, and that will change over time because we'll end up servicing 3 different tiers. We have a light product that's coming out this year that will go down market and be available to be more of a Bill.com level, and we're also going to be able to integrate with AX, SAP, and Oracle in 2022 as well. So we're going to soup it up for the enterprise. So we'll end up having 3 different kind of groups that we can satisfy. But right now we've been mainly differentiating by focusing on what is the need of that mid-market. And the mid-market tends to be a lot of multi-entity. So that means that there's a company under one name, and Harbor Air is a good example, where they have 9 legal entities. It's really just one company with one accounting team, one CFO, but there are people all over the place, and there are different approvers for different companies, there's different rules for each company, and they have one accounting team that's kind of intaking and all of the information and invoices for all of the 9 companies. So our system now allows, and we're the only one that does, that allows true multi-entity in one view, one login, and one sync system for as many entities as you have, from purchase order all the way to electronic payments. And that has been, and now including expense management, which and corporate credit card reconciliation, which is coming early next year, but the expense management for employee reimbursement is already there, and a mobile app. So these are the features. This is the feature set that we have put out that is unique to the space at the moment, and also our dedication to caring about what the accounting team needs as our first priority. So we say we're built by accountants for accountants, and we, from a product perspective, that's how we think about it, and that really delights our customers in the user experience that they have. That's something they're not used to, because accounting software is not usually a pleasant experience, and I know that from my own personal experience with accounting software. And so we try to drive a nice, pleasant Apple-like experience in our application because the people spend a lot of time in it, and we want them to be happy there.
How do you relate to like the Microsoft channel itself? Are you accustomed to, or do you plan to work very closely with reselling partners, for example?
Yes.
Do you plan? Okay. I know quite a few of them tend to have at least some people on their staffs who also sort of have that accounting background.
Yeah, we've done that already in with a different market, and we're spent the last couple of years building up that channel program. So now we have that for the Microsoft channel, and we've already engaged with it. They were waiting for a couple of additional integration points before igniting us into some of their customer base. And that's something we just released last month, or it's just coming out this month, one of the two. And that's going to increase our ability to service a broader customer base for the whole Microsoft market. But it's nice because we've been around a while and we have some experience, and we're over 1,000 customers now, which gives us lots of referral, and makes the partners feel more comfortable that they're advising in a way that's going to delight their customers and not to upset them that something doesn't work properly.
Yeah, sure. And partners tend to be very mindful of, can they trust these other vendors who they're going to be trying to bring in front of their customers, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's very important to them. Yeah, and it should be.
Yeah. Any other, I don't know, you already mentioned a few, but in terms of differentiators, you mentioned sort of full steam ahead with product development in other areas that either broaden your potential market or just broaden the functions of what you're able to bring them. Anything else you would mention around the efforts that you're undertaking there?
Yeah, we've got a couple of interesting things. I mean, one is, as I said, is the corporate credit card receipt reconciliation process. We've already been designed, and we're just finishing off a new user interface that we're launching in early next year. Once that's launched, we're able to deploy the new corporate credit card function, which we already have a module that allows you to bring in expense receipts, whether it's corporate credit cards or personal. But now we're going to add an ability for you to bring in your card feed and auto match it. And part of that comes from another feature that we're just launching now, which is auto coding, where OCR technology is able to automatically read line item data and look back at the history of how you've been treating that particular vendor's invoices, and do an AI-based coding process where it says, that stationery is probably office supplies, so let's look for the GL code in your GL list that says office supplies. So we're about to launch our next version of Smart Code, which we're calling Auto Code with line item capture, and that's going to lead into the ability to do the corporate credit card work with receipt management and OCR capture on that as well. So these are all kind of really cool things in our longer term plan, which is to get to we call it Bean Flow, which is because we like to play with the name Bean on everything, where it's touchless accounting, and you're managing by exception instead of having to manage every single invoice. You have the same recurring invoice comes every month. We should be able to, even with slight variances in the amounts, we should be able to code that for you. The system should be able to take it all the way through and just have approvals on the payment side, and then report to you any anomalies that the system sees with any of these invoices, and send out ones for a detailed look that are totally different than what you would be expecting, whether it's matching it to a purchase order or just a pattern within that vendor that you normally work with. So that's the type of thing we're launching in 2022.
Interesting. Do you think a lot of customers are ready for that, or ready to be sold on that?
Oh, yeah. It's an idea that came from them. So, it was actually years ago, I was at a conference talking to a large customer we would never have serviced because they're more like 50,000 invoices a month. And I said to the gentleman who's running his shared services, I said, if you could wave a magic wand, what would be your perfect payables process? And what he described was what I just described a second ago. Just manage by exception. Have it come in, code it automatically, have it ready, lined up for payment, and only tell me if something is off. I'm like, and he had that recommendation that was like at least 10 years ago. There was no ability in technology at the time to do any of that. So we've found a fantastic OCR system that we've been using for a couple of years now, just getting it ready to launch fully across our platform so that its accuracy is 100%, and then use the intelligence built into it, because it's an AI-based OCR, to leverage behavior of a customer's interactions with their vendors and determine from that history how they're likely going to code that invoice.
Are there any other customer stories or experiences that they've shared with you and your team from the past year that demonstrate some of the challenges they've seen or the things they really want from you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is in the past 18 months. The same problems have always been around, things like chasing approvers for approving paper. Used to be in the office, much harder to do with email. And a lot of our customers that came to us in the past 18 months were been forced to go home and try to figure out how to do the things they did in the office with physical paper in a digital way. So they were using email, they'd scan their invoices, they'd have to somehow attach an email approval to an invoice PDF to send it to somebody else to put into the accounting system manually. Very convoluted. Invoices would get lost. It'd take way too long to pay their vendors, and some of the vendors would threaten to cut them off. So these are all things that accounting teams get very upset about, because their job is to make sure that doesn't happen. And so having a tool that gives them pure visibility 100% of the time into everything, and a tracking system where they know exactly who did what to the invoice and when, massively changes how they get their job done. So that across all of our customers, they'll tell you that same thing over and over again, that it's errors, it's chasing down invoices, it's inefficiencies, it's mistakes. All of these things get resolved with the Beanworks platform, and really speed up everything and give people the ability to even go all the way to electronic payment, which was a big problem in the pandemic, was people who are still on checks. Like, how do we pay? How do we cut checks? We had a customer that, like, the only place they could print their checks was in the office. So when we were told not to go to the office, accounting people still had to go to the office to pick up invoice payments from customers. We had the same problem. We had the odd customer still paying us by check, and we had to go pick up physical checks and take them and deposit them in the bank. You had to do that regardless of the pandemic. You had to collect your money, you had to keep paying your staff. So that was a common problem across all of our customers, but except for those who are already on electronic payments, they were just very happy. Like, so I'm glad we did this. And a lot of them would say, hey, we were already on your platform, and we were so grateful because we went remote without any hassles. Just simple, go home, do it all from there, at least from a payables perspective. And then those that hadn't added the payments module yet were like, okay, we need to add the payments module. so it was pretty significant for a lot of customers. And we feel really good about celebrating that every week as a company, because we get to hear the stories. We share those stories with the whole company every week about the problems and challenges our customers had, and when they automated, what happened and how they feel about it. And, we really are making these people's lives better. And it's not saving babies, but it's saving some people's sanities. And we really drive our passion from empowering the accounting teams that we work with to succeed in their role.
I wanted to shift it just a bit because, like you said it early on, you've had really significant growth. You obviously had this acquisition, which is a huge deal, obviously, for the company. When you think about sort of your leadership and growing your team and your organization and focusing on what your customers need, how are you planning for what's next?
What's interesting now is, we've been, up until now, we've kind of been a Vancouver-based office. We had lots of customers in the United States who did everything remote, but we really did not have a strong presence in Europe. And the idea of global expansion was in our minds, but we didn't know how we were going to get there. And now that we've been acquired, we have a network of people that are dying to sell our product, dying to roll out our product. Europe is desperate for it. And that surprised me. I wasn't expecting any of that because I wasn't watching the European market, which I should have been. I would have potentially seen this coming. But the challenge we had was, how are we going to expand globally? And a combination of the acquisition and the pandemic forcing us to work in a remote world completely allowed us to think differently and realize we don't have to hire in Vancouver for everything. And that's what we were doing up until that point. So now we've hired somebody in New Mexico and a couple of people in India, and somebody, although I think they're actually moving into Canada eventually. We've got someone in the States. We've got somebody in Ireland who was working North American hours who can now shift to European hours. So it's an interesting thought process. It's when you think through logistically how you're actually going to expand into a market that is 9 hours time zone difference, and also difficult with current travel restrictions to even get to. How do you do it? And we needed that guidance from our parent company to say, this is how you do it. And so Quadient is leading the charge on making it possible for us to bring our product everywhere. They're in 80 countries. So we're starting in Europe, but their intention is to get us everywhere.
When it comes to innovation, I mean, you've spoken already about several areas of your own plans, but do you have any, like maybe even a further outlook on what it really means for adding innovation or in finance, and maybe what your clients might be doing even years down the road at this point?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, it's the same in a lot of industries. There's a large group of people who are my age who are going to retire in the next few years, and a lot of them are in finance. So if you look at the age of people in this sector, there will not be the human power there to do the manual work that is currently done today. Finance has to automate. And most of a lot of the legwork or labor work that goes into accounting is repetitive in nature and can be automated. Because it can be automated, it will be automated. And this is just the beginning. So, I used to say years ago that the automation process started when accounting systems came along and removed the manual posting of journal entries, which is what accounting systems do. They just take your data and they put it into the subledgers, and then they report back what's in the subledgers. That's the fundamental of an accounting package. And those have evolved and gotten better and better at doing that, but they haven't gone to the next step, which is to offer complete automation of the workflow and help accounting teams become strategic business partners instead of people that are getting the history of the company and recording it accurately and just giving you that report. Because the future of finance is around being a strategic partner with in the management team and in the company itself in driving good business decisions based on historical information and current market information and predicting the future, which is what accountants do all the time. Their job is to figure out what your forecast is going to be, right? What's next year? How much are we going to spend and how much money are we going to make next year? And their focus should be much more on the future and less on the past. And the only way you do that is if you don't have to spend days and weeks doing month end every single month. You want to be able to have month end rather automated so that it's done every day. And you can have your reporting anytime you want. And you can then decide what to do with that information within your sector. And that's where I think the future is for finance. It's a few years away, but AI, there's a MindBridge in Ottawa is an AI a company that's leading the way on audits, automating the audit process. I think a lot of the audit process, the mechanics of it will get automated. And then it'll be the understanding and interpreting in the accounting rules that will really be the piece that the auditors do. But a lot of the physical work will just get digitized and turn into an automated process.
Do you see the people in these organizations? You mentioned a lot of retirements coming up soon. Do you see the next generation of finance professionals ready to sort of pick up that banner and lead their organizations to that?
I think they expect it because a CPA today coming out of school is already living in a digital world, has had a smartphone or probably had an iPad since they were young. My kids' iPads came out after my kids were born, but my kids are, my son taught himself how to code, and they're all very tech savvy, and they expect the world to be this way. And so if they show up in an accounting office and everything's old and paper and it's manual, they're not going to be satisfied. They're going to go work for some company that is. So really attracting and retaining future talent in accounting will require it to be less manual, at least in the Western world.
Well, great. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me about all this and sharing more about the organization and your plans for the future. Anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, I think it's great that these topics are coming up and that the financial professionals are starting to see themselves as strategic drivers of decisions in businesses, because that's really where there's more interesting work to be done. And I think once we get to a place where technology takes care of all the labor and gives us the information at our fingertips, then as a CPA, I would be, as a CFO, I would be a very, very happy person if I could just have accurate information right now and not have to wait for it. and then work on automating how do I build models out so I can be a more accurate prediction of the future where business should go.
Excellent. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Oh, thank you, Jason. I really appreciate it.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Catherine for joining us. And this message from Beanworks. Eliminate 83% of data entry with AI-powered header and line item data capture so your team can focus on higher value tasks. Manage POs, invoices, payments, and expenses from a central platform. For more information, visit beanworks.com or email them at sales@beanworks.com. And that's it for this episode of the podcast. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Please also follow us on Twitter and on LinkedIn for all of our updates. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.